Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, to a brand new edition of Vestiges After Dark. I am your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, coming to you live from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains on this April 23rd, 2020. And tonight we're going to be taking questions, actually from a Twitter feed that we weren't able to answer all the great questions that came in. There's several good questions, too many to even get to, so I'll do my best. But we're going to spend the next hour or two answering as many of them as we can. They came in from you on Twitter, from the post that went out for the CyberCon. It was only asked, I think, 3 or 4 questions on CyberCon, so we'll get the rest of those questions taken care of tonight. So don't go away. We have a really interesting evening ahead for you. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new edition of Vestiges After Dark. I hope everyone is having a wonderful evening tonight. It's been a bit cold and wet out here in the Georgia area, which I guess is kind of welcomed. Quiets everybody down when it's raining outside, so I kind of like it that way. I hope quarantine is treating all of you very well. It's not terribly different for me since so much of my work actually is done from my home office. Other than the fact that we haven't been able to do any investigations, hasn't been terribly different than my normal routine, other than, having to eat in instead of going out. But, that's just the way that it is right now. I just also want to let everyone know that if you want to join the live chat on Spreaker, you have to actually listen on Spreaker. I'm not able to follow the feed on Facebook, although I know a lot of you prefer watching a video feed. So if you want to do that, that's fine. Go ahead and watch on Facebook if you want, but I won't be able to see a lot of the chat just because the way my setup is here. But there's 2 ways to listen tonight, Spreaker and Facebook. Now, understand, sometimes we've had feed problems and sound problems through Facebook. That happens from time to time. And right now, because everybody's home, the internet is really taxed a great deal more than it usually is. So that could create some problems on the Facebook Live. And if that happens, we'll go to break. I'll try to bring it back up. But the more stable feed is going to be Spreaker. So if you can't get a good audio, or if there's a lot of choppiness on Facebook Live, come to Spreaker. Okay, that's the Spreaker channel for Vestiges After Dark. You can look that up on Google. It's right now posted to my Twitter feed. I think it's also on Facebook for the public page for Exorcist Bishop. All of that is available there. So a couple ways to listen tonight, but Spreaker's always going to be the more reliable feed. Okay, but I know a lot of you want to see the video, so that's why I try to set it up that way. But understand, the internet is being strained a little bit more than usual right now, and that could pose some problems for us. Other than that, I do want to mention a few things. I don't do a lot of Vestiges anymore because out of all the programs that the Holy Nicholean Catholic Church offers, this is the one that is the least funded. And it seems to be one of the more popular things because I hear a lot of people asking me to do more episodes. But understand it's very hard to put time into this if it's not really going to aid the ministry in any way. So we now have a way for you to give a donation, or better yet, a monthly pledge, which is what this ministry really needs to do the work that it does. And there's a way for you to be able to allocate where your donations go. And so if you really do like Vestiges After Dark, please consider giving to it so that we can do more episodes. Essentially, what I'd like to be able to see is about $150 an episode coming in. I think that is a reasonable amount for the amount of time and work that goes into it. And like I said, it helps us be able to do all the other things that the ministry does. But you can find out more information about that by just going to Nicholean.org or esotericcatholic.org. That's the primary website for the ministry. And you can click on the donation button there. And when you scroll down on the side, you'll see donation or help us help others. And you click on that and it'll show you some of the ways in which you can allocate your donation to support the different programs that we have here. And, you know, I kind of consider Vestiges After Dark to be sort of part of the teaching ministry. Certainly when we're doing things like this, answering your questions on Twitter, or from Twitter, I should say, it's definitely part of the teaching ministry at this point. So it's definitely something that I think is warranted within the spectrum of what this church does, since it's sort of an unconventional church and it has unconventional work associated with it. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out. So if you do find value in Vestiges After Dark or Vestiges of Christianity, please consider supporting it. Otherwise, you know, I just can't spend a lot of time doing it. Although I will give an episode here and there from time to time. I'm not doing questions on Twitter anymore, as you've probably noticed. I'm a lot quieter on social media these days, just because, you know, I get tired of the hostilities and the controversies and people trying to bait me into a debate. It became too much. So I don't mind, you know, creating a safe forum for discussion. And a lot of times the best way to do that is to just ask your questions or what your questions are, and I can answer them on Vestiges or do a Q&A on Facebook Live or something like that, which I think in some ways it's just going to be a lot better, and it won't be so divisive, and it won't be so distracting from what we're doing. Because when people start attacking me, I don't take that lightly, and I come back, you know, usually twice as strong. That's just the kind of person that I am. You know, I'm not your average kind of person. I'm certainly not your average bishop, nor am I your average Christian. You know, a lot of people perceive Christians to be people that take things sitting down, always turning the other cheek. I'm sorry, that's just not me. All right, that works. You know, that works for some. You know, those people that are trying to attain to you know, the personification of sainthood, by all means, have at it. I think it's great. But that's not who I am, and I'm never going to give you anything less than my highest authenticity, and I'm never going to share anything with you that isn't part of my highest convictions. And my convictions are usually based on observations more than anything else, although sometimes, you know, I do share opinions, but if I do share an opinion, I will typically state that this is my opinion. And, you know, speaking of controversies, even on Facebook, you know, I have a private page now for the sponsors of the church. So those that, you know, give a pledge to the church of $10 a month or better can go to this private page where there aren't any trolls, and there is the controversy just isn't there, and they can ask their questions freely, and I can answer them more completely, and we just don't have any of the trolling and the other things that do go on. So all of that, you know, is a better environment all the way around. But, you know, I have many Facebook avenues. I don't really run much of the Facebook page except for the sponsors page. That's the one that I am actively involved in on a personal level, because that's where I, you know, actually interact with all of you who support this ministry. But, you know, as far as like the public page for Exorcist Bishop or the Nicholean Church, you know, I don't really run those, and so I'll sometimes come on and interact a little bit, but sometimes when there are interactions there, it's my staff. We all try to work there, and a lot of things that we do get sometimes are private messages that come in. Right now, that is not a good way to try to reach out to this ministry if you need help. If you need help from this ministry, then you need to go to the website and fill out an intake form at esotericcatholic.org. because that's the only way your case is going to be put into the system for us to consider for taking cases in the future. Okay, we don't have the time or resources to take private messages. And a lot of people try to send me private messages on my private Facebook account, and I have to tell you that I don't check those. Okay, if I'm connected to you on Facebook, I will take direct, private messages from people that I am connected to directly on Facebook. But understand, my private page on Facebook is exactly that. It's my private page on Facebook. I don't connect to people I don't know there. So they're all made up of my friends, family, or direct colleagues, or people I've at least known for a long time. Okay. And so that's what makes up my Facebook page. Understand that I don't really expect you to follow me there, or interact with me there, because I don't take interactions there from people I don't know. But I will be very controversial over there. I don't do that on the public pages. Even though my private Facebook page is actually public, I make public posts there. But I don't do the controversial stuff on Twitter, because I know you're not really interested. Most of you are not interested in what I think politically, or what I think about, certain situations that are going on. So I don't share those things on Twitter. I don't share those things on the public pages on Facebook. I reserve that content for my private Facebook account. And that's where I share my inner thoughts. And right now there's a lot of controversy going on because I don't share the popular narrative on a lot of the things that are going on with the coronavirus crisis. Okay. And I don't expect you to agree with everything that I say. And guess what? We're not supposed to agree with everything that everybody says. That's what makes freedom a wonderful thing. Okay. And so I don't, I want people to understand that I'm not going to tolerate controversy on my Facebook page. All right. If you're fortunate enough to be connected to me, you need to respect the people that I'm connected to there, and respect the opinions, because that's where I do share my opinions. I don't do that on Twitter unless I'm asked. Sometimes people ask me, "What do you think of this?" Well, then I'll give an opinion. Sometimes it's necessary for me to give an opinion. I'll give an opinion. Okay. But I'll always state it. But on Facebook, that's, my private Facebook page, that's where I share my opinions. If you don't like them, don't follow me. Unfriend me. Okay? But do not harass my friends and followers there. Okay? I will not tolerate that. So, I just want to make that clear to everybody that that's the way things work here. And I don't give a damn if you don't like it. That's just the way it works. And just before I even came on to the show, I was dealing with stuff like that. I'm sick and tired of it with social media. Okay. Get over it. We have different opinions. All of us do. We're all entitled to them. And some of us are drawing from different sources than other people, which draws the different perspectives. That's the way it works. Anyway, just want to vent that because, these are the types of things that piss me off. And, this is part of the reason why I'm not active on Twitter anymore, at least outside of just basically doing mundane things or sharing announcements. But anyway, tonight we're going to be taking your questions that you asked. I asked you because I was on CyberCon, and I was asked I asked the fans, what questions do you want answered, and I gave some of the best ones and answered, I think, 3 or 4 of them on CyberCon. But there were so many good ones. I really couldn't even choose which ones I liked the most. So I had to really basically narrow it down. And I decided that some of these questions were so good, let's go ahead and just answer them on Vestiges so that, you guys get an opportunity to get the answers that you're really seeking. And I didn't want to leave you without an answer to some of these questions, particularly since I'm not taking them on Twitter in the direct way anymore. So what we're going to do is I'm going to that post, and I'm going to go down the list, and I'm going to read them all off, and we're going to get through as many as we can until we run out of time. But I'm planned on being here for a while tonight, so let's see how it goes, okay? Is everybody ready for this? I think I am. And there's nobody else with me tonight, no guests, no co-hosts, just you and me answering questions from Twitter. Kind of like the way it always is, only without the trolls, because, Well, we don't need trolls, and I'm basically up to here with trolls. It's enough already. It's enough. Okay, let's look and see what we got going on here. So the first question is from Andra. Okay, and this was on April 17th, and she asks, I would like to ask you, have you ever had a demon try to deter you from coming to a location, and or have you ever had a dream prior to any investigations where a demon warns you not to come? And I think some people ask similar questions a little further down the list, so if they do, we're just going to pass those because I'll have answered them now. But to answer that question, to the first part, since there's really two questions there, honestly, I have had demons try to deter me from coming, typically with the stronger cases. One of the earliest cases I took in recent times, I should say, there's been several incarnations of this ministry, and the current one that we've been working on, I would say, back in, how many years? It was several years ago. We had a case that was out of state, actually, and the individual left a voicemail on the church voicemail in the middle of the night, and I got that voice message, and on it was actually an EVP, and I never really received an EVP from a voicemail before. But it was very interesting, and she's talking about some of the experiences that she's currently having, very much upset. You can hear it in her voice. And, apparently something was going on at that very moment, which prompted her to call us. And, while she's talking, you hear this voice come over and say in a very deep, dark, demonic EVP sounding voice, "It's over." Just like that. Very fascinating. And it was kind of like the first, I guess you could say, warning that we received for that particular case. But the next morning I woke up and the entire first floor of my house, not the house that I live in now, it was another house at the time, was completely covered in flies. Just like Amityville Horror. I mean, they were everywhere. I'd say there was 60, 70 of them. We had no idea how these flies got in. It wasn't like we had barbecued or left windows open or, had trash hanging around or something where, it just out of nowhere, all these flies just manifested. And it took all day to get rid of them. Sitting there with a fly swatter, trying to wipe them out. And that was the day actually before we actually left on the case. So that is one very good example of a demonic warning. But I can't say I've ever received a dream, where I was warned in a dream. No, I can't say that I've ever encountered anything like that. And typically I don't get warnings not to come. The one that I just shared with you is a more extreme example. But that's something that did happen, and it only happened that one time. Sometimes I'll get a headache before a case, which I think is sometimes a bit of a warning, but I can't tell if it's just, the energy getting ready for this case and everything else that could be causing that. Anyway, that's one of the things that has happened and kind of answers the question, I hope. Okay, next question. Princess One Cindy asks, what is the one experience that shook me the most? I can't say I really get shaken up very much. Every case is just a case. And I do the best that I can with every case. And I put my energy into it the best that I can. And the goal is always to heal the client. The goal is always to give the client the best possible outcome that I can hopefully facilitate. So, my goodness, I can't think of a time where I was really shaken up. There are cases where, I was more energy exhaustion than, or more energy exhausted than other times. And I would say, anytime there is a need for the solemn rite of exorcism, those are always extremely draining experiences where I basically, take a week off after any one of those because it's just it takes that much out of you. But I wouldn't say it's because I've been shaken up by it. It's more of a just having to deal with the underlying effects of energy exchange is what it is. It's all about energy. So I don't know. I guess that doesn't really answer the question, but I can't really think of one where I was really shaken up. That doesn't really much happen. I'm not really affected by this work in that way. All right. Angel Marie from April 6th. What was your scariest paranormal experience, and which episode did you enjoy doing on Ghost Adventures? Sorry, you can pick one or the other. Well, I'll try to answer the first. The first one's long, and I've answered it before. So I had a Ouija board experience once. I wouldn't say it was scary. I think it would scare people. I've had an alien experience once too, which I guess could scare people. And I've talked about that on Vestiges After Dark before. I can't remember which episodes they were in. Maybe somebody in the chat remembers, and they can post that in the chat. And if I see it, I'll mention it. But I can't remember. I think there was definitely one we did, if I'm not mistaken, on Ouija boards, and it might have been that one. There's definitely one we did on aliens where I talked about it. So that's all something that hopefully will answer that first part of the question without having to go through the long story, because it's a long story and I don't want to waste all an evening talking about one experience. So the next part of that question, which episode did I enjoy doing the most on Ghost Adventures? Which one did I enjoy the most? Let me think about that one. I really have to think about this one. Because it's not really fun. I mean, it maybe should be fun to be on television, to be on, such a big show, but it's. I would say I would have to say probably Exorcism in Erie, just because it was the first, and it was a case that was immediately recognizable and easy to resolve. So I would say that one was probably the one I enjoyed being on the most. And so Marina in the chat on Spreaker said the Ouija board episode, Dangerous Games, the Ouija board. That's where I talk about one of my spookiest paranormal experiences. So look that one up for that question if you're interested in that answer. Ouija board, Dangerous Games, the Ouija board. Look up Dangerous Games, the Ouija board. It was a Vestiges After Dark. Thank you, Marina, for that one. I appreciate it. All right, let's see. What do we got next here? Laurie Dobbins from April 17th asks, when you did the exorcism on the woman before you burned her box of her ex's memories who had committed suicide on Ghost Adventures, I see her roll her eyes afterwards. Do you think she still has an attachment? Well, honestly, after we left there, I think she was very upset that she was required for her own, treatment plan to have to break the attachment to those objects. But honestly, she was very much better after the cameras were off, and we don't just end the episode and then walk out. There's still a lot of things that go on outside of the filming schedule, and so she was very much more understanding to the situation, and some of those feelings that she was having were starting to subside at that point. She gave me a big hug. She gave Sister Mary Joan a big hug. I didn't get any impression that she was angry or had any residual effects at that time. Now, that being said, it's not uncommon for people to have a continued effect from this thing as time goes on. So understand that, when we are dealing with any kind of attachment, even once you successfully break the attachment, there's always going to be residual effects. It's just kind of like, it's almost identical to going into, a surgery and the surgeon removes a tumor. You're not going to just like wake up and then, go back to normal life after that. There's going to be a recovery period. And there's going to be pain and discomfort and still, sensations in that general area. And that's all something that is part of the process. Exorcism is a process. It's not an instant fix. It's not like a magic wand where it all goes away. It takes time to get a person fully healed, and it takes a lot of client compliance to make sure that happens. Remember, the exorcist is just a facilitator. He does not, under any circumstances, do everything. He facilitates energy. It's basically a facilitation of God's grace. But Christ is ultimately the exorcist, and the long-term healing is compliance of the client. You don't always have that luxury. Clients don't always understand or want to understand that. It's something that you have to deal with. But no, I don't think she had one, at least not when we left. Whether or not there were, lingering attachments that she had to the situation, not wanting to let go, whether or not there were other things going on in there that we did not uncover because, the downside to a filming schedule is the amount of time that goes into it. I'll tell you, I just don't know. I mean, it's hard to say, but unless they call you and ask for you to come back, you really have to always assume that it's a case closed. It's not really our policy anymore to keep calling the client. We have found that it's far better to let once you've given instructions, once you've done the work that needed to be done, it's much better to let the client lead their resolution from that point forward. So if they don't call us, we have to move on to other cases anyway. We have far too many, more than we could possibly ever get to. And that creates, a need that is just the way the work is with the limited resources we have. Not just money, but also people. There's just not a lot of people that we have available to do this work. And so, we can't spend too much time on one case unless that client requests that extra time, feels they need that extra time. And at that point, we of course, comply. But from that particular case, we did not hear from the client, which is usually a good sign. This is kind of the thing. No news is good news. It's very true in this work. Michelle, on the chat room on Spreaker, I see that you said you flipped over here from Facebook Live. Was the feed on Facebook not doing well? Was there sound issues? I just would like to know, based upon, what's going on. Because I can't really read the Facebook feed right now, just the way that my setup is. But I can see the feed on Spreaker. But Michelle, if you could let me know that, I really, really appreciate it. Because I want to make sure that Facebook Live is working out. If you guys can hear me and see me okay on Facebook Live, give me a whole lot of hearts. That will let me know. I can see the hearts. Okay. Let's go at the next question here. Okay, no issues from Michelle. Excellent. Good deal. All right. Moon, 69% from April 16th says, I would like to know what set your mind to become an exorcist. What drew you towards it? It's a great question. I get it quite frequently. And the answer is sometimes a little bit shocking to people, honestly. To be completely frank, you don't choose to become it. If a person wants to do this work, that's usually a good sign that they probably shouldn't. And honestly, the work chooses you, typically against your better judgment. It's a true vocation. You're called to it. And if you truly are called by God to do this work, then you're going to be put in a position to do it. You don't have to do anything to make that happen. Of course, in the Catholic tradition, the exorcists are drawn from the priesthood only. Now, in this tradition, in the Nicholean tradition, obviously nuns can come in and help. And we used to have lay ministers that help. We don't have that anymore. But we used to. And, there are different ministries that do it different ways, even old Catholic ones, even within the Order of Exorcists that do it different ways. And, that's just one, we're just one of many, and that's just our policy. And that's very much in line with the Roman Catholic policy. It's, only the priesthood can perform the exorcisms. And that's because of training and the need for grace and the special kind of grace that the priesthood offers. It's not really an elitist thing. There's definitely people that have a natural charism, and it's truly a charism of the Holy Spirit. It is a gift of the Holy Spirit to be successful in this work. Overall, the priesthood is a very special grace that gives one even additional protections in doing this kind of work. So in the Roman Catholic Church, as well as in the Nicholean Catholic Church, only priests or bishops can perform exorcisms. But I did not choose it, and what drew me to it was necessity. Basically, the people that needed help were coming to me, and I'm a servant as a priest, as a pastor. My goal is to give people the grace that they need, and this was the grace that they needed. So, any priest, any pastor, any bishop needs to be prepared to do an exorcism. Unfortunately, the red tape in the Roman Catholic Church makes that very difficult. But in the old Catholic churches, and the smaller churches, and the independent churches like the Nicholean Church, there's none of that administrative red tape to cut through, which makes it easier to help people. But we all have to be prepared for that if we're going to do this work. And so, I was very well prepared. I was fortunate that I had some extensive training in this. I never thought I'd ever need to use it, but it turned out that God was preparing me for something, and I went ahead and did that. I answered the call, very unwillingly. I had no desire to do this. My goal in becoming a pastor is, I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice to be able to perform weddings and baptisms and care for, families and give them, spiritual encouragement and support. I never thought I'd be working on the dark side, like this full time. I mean, to the point that we don't even really do those other ministries anymore, unfortunately, just because our entire effort is taken up in this. Unfortunately, I do have the teaching ministry, which really gives me a little bit of sanity, because if you're just dealing with the darkness all the time, that's not really a healthy thing for anybody, even me. Hope that answers the question. All right, Paranormal TV on April 17th asked, my question would be, do you and the sister pray and talk about pray and talk about these situations ahead of time? By situations, I'm assuming they mean the cases. And we do. We always talk about the cases. We always go into a complete pre-briefing, and even have a debriefing afterwards. Where we discuss strategies and plan of attack and that kind of thing, what you would do in any kind of situation like this. And as far as prayer, what we do before every case, typically, particularly when we do a Ghost Adventures, is we take the Eucharist. So we perform what is known as the rite of communion outside of Mass. And so Sister Mary Joan and I will receive the Eucharist right before we go, so that we are entirely empowered by the living presence of Christ within us, which is a wonderful thing, and has always given us tremendous support in all of the work that we do. So that's that's what we do. That's our prayer ahead of time. And of course, we do add intercessions in for, the family and that type of thing. All right, keep going here. Robin Wenk Williams from April 17th asks, what is the difference between exorcising a created demon and an actual fallen angel? And how many fallen angels have you done battle with over the years? To the second question, very, 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 very few. There's not many of those kinds of cases. And typically fallen angels have far better things to do. So we don't really encounter them all that often. And people are typically very good at creating their own demons from their own traumas and their own paradigms and their own biases. And so they create all sorts of evil for themselves any way they want to. So it is an interesting thing to see, but it's an unfortunate thing at the same time, because that first part of the question where they're saying a created demon, if those of you who have never heard me talk about the 4 types of demons that this model that we use works towards, or I should say works from, then it might seem like a new term to you. But what we refer to as created demon is one of the 4 classes. Fallen angel is one of the 4 classes. And then there's 2 others, elementals and wrathful spirits. But created demons are essentially just that. They are manifestations of our psyche, okay? Externalizations typically of our psyche's internal traumas. So most of the time, demonic attachment is from a created, almost always. Something that we brought into this world. And I've said it at Mass. If you haven't watched any of the Masses that I have offered during this health crisis and people are not able to go to the churches, hopefully you've seen some of my sermons and you've heard me mention, that you don't need a Dybbuk box, a Ouija board, tarot cards, occult rituals to create a portal. You don't even need a portal to have a portal. All you need is your own imperfections, your own traumas, your own sinfulness will produce all the demons you would ever need in your life. And the fallen angels know this, which is why typically fallen angels only get involved when a person is remarkably resilient, and for whatever reason comes under their radar and becomes the source of the attack. But, those are people that tend to be the stronger ones, honestly, that end up getting attacked by the real fallen angels. It's the created demons that most of the average population would deal with. So, created demons, that's going to be something that you see. That's going to be something that is the most common. Most of the time they are manifestations out of our psyche. So think of them in occult terms as an egregore, a tulpa, a thought form. There's different words that they use, and all those words mean slightly different things. But overall, that's what you're dealing with here, and that's the majority of them. So that's the difference. Fallen angel, on the other hand, is you're talking about an actual sentient, separate being. This is not something that was generated out of human consciousness. This is a being that was created a very, very, very long time ago, and has remarkable power and ability. The good news, though, is that darkness has no power of its own. So angels give up most of their, or I should say, angels give up all of their power when they fall. And that's why they latch on to us, because they can feed off of our energy and our sinfulness that we give them. So usually the energy that they love most is fear. And so fear is the greatest thing. And I noticed somebody in the chat was talking about the coronavirus and the fear response that's attached to this and whether or not that's making it worse. And I want to say, yes, absolutely it is. Look, there's a real health crisis out there, okay? But by responding to it with fear and anxiety, you're only making it worse. By taking out the rationality of it, by taking out the mathematics of it, and turning it into a political issue, and making it a item of divisiveness, that is what's giving it more power than it needs, and that's why it's still with us. Honestly, it's why it will continue. The more and the greater the fear response, the worse it's going to get. Because that's just what evil does. And I'm not saying that evil produced the coronavirus. Nothing in creation is intrinsically good or evil. Nothing. Okay? We create those qualifiers. All right? By interacting with these things in the various ways that we do. By giving a fear response and only operating from that basis, you create an egregore. So now it is sort of an act of evil. It's almost its own demon now. That's very dangerous stuff, particularly when you have the whole world doing it now. I mean, it's like, this is a true egregore. Egregore, the difference between like a thought form and an egregore, or a tulpa and an egregore, is tulpas and thought forms are typically personal things that are manifested. Usually only the person who manifests them can interact with them. Sometimes it can get powerful and start to affect the phenomenal world outside of the individual, but very often it's just the person. But an egregore is when multiple people are interacting with it and multiple people are creating it and putting energy into it. Fear does this. This is what fear does. So, when you see me talk, I'm always going to be coming from a place without fear. And there's nothing that scares me, okay? Not even death itself. I will always choose the path of liberty and the path of fearlessness over even life. Okay, so if that taking that path means my own demise, I will still take the path of freedom, and I will still take the path of fearlessness. That's just the only way I can live. I can't live any other way. All right. And, I feel like I have a very comfortable relationship with God. And there's a lot of comfort that comes with that. So, death is really not a big deal to me. So it's not like I'm going to go out there and put myself in harm's way. That would actually be irresponsible. But at the same time, there are sometimes moments in one's life where we must respond and take risk, and certainly when it comes to the demonic, fearlessness is the only way to approach it. Very rarely do I ever encounter people that are strong enough to deal with that. Not that I'm some great person. I'm not. I'm a very flawed person. Okay, and if you see me outside in the secular world, you'll know that. I don't try to put on a pretense. I don't try to be like, oh, look at me, I'm the nice holy Christian bishop. Look at me, I'm the next saint. I should be pope. That's not me. If you think that's me, you don't know me very well. And if you think that's what being a Christian is, you don't know what a Christian is either. That's not Christianity. That's you know what that is? That's pretense. That's falsity. That's lies. That's deception. We're all sinners. And that doesn't mean that you don't try to make yourself better and work to perfect yourself, but it's always a work of perfection. I will never sacrifice my authenticity to create the persona of holiness. Okay, I won't do it. Okay. And so, you're going to get me with all the flaws, and you're going to get me with, I can be a vulgar person sometimes. It's just the way that's the way I talk. I notice that in this generation, that's typically the language they understand. And if that's what they need to hear, then I'll be more than happy to comply with it. Because they're just words to me, right? Might be more to someone else, but they're only words to me. And words don't mean much unless you put the actions behind them. All right. Enough of that. Let's get on to the next one. Okay. This is from Ms. J. Whitefeather. I'd like to know what spiritual characteristics you have that uniquely qualified you to become an exorcist. That's not a vocation for the faint of heart. I personally wouldn't want to do it, but I'm curious to know why someone else would do it. Okay. Well, you do it out of necessity, because as pastors, we are here to serve. We're here to serve the Christian people. We're here to serve the church. And so, out of necessity of serving the church, this is one of the things that we must do. So that's the be-all and end-all of doing it. As far as the spiritual characteristics, we've talked a lot about that already in a way. It's having enough faith to be fearless. And someone in the chat said faith over fear. Michelle did. Faith over fear. That's exactly what it is. Faith over fear. Okay? And that doesn't mean you're stupid about your faith. It doesn't mean you take unnecessary risks and chances. But it does mean that you always approach things from the vantage point of objectivity and reason, because that's the gifts that God really give us. So I would say the spiritual characteristics that are necessary to be successful in this work are reason. I would say you need to have a decent intellect, a good head on your shoulders. You need to be able to have a strong commitment to faith, and be able to operate and function without fear. You need to be ready to face the darkness, which means being ready to face death at any moment. If you can't do those things, you're going to really struggle to get through this work. So those are some of the characteristics, some of the gifts. But see, this is empowered by the Holy Spirit. They're not like special things that we make ourselves. I mean, these are things that the Holy Spirit gives us. Even faith itself. Never get really upset with a non-Christian or even an atheist or an agnostic person, because those are just symptoms that they've never been given the gift of faith. Now, sometimes they have intentionally rejected their opportunities to be given that gift. Sometimes they are given the gift and they throw it away. That does happen. But that's not really for you to judge. It's really for them and God to figure out at some point. But always pray for them, because typically speaking, if a person is lacking in faith, it's because they never really were given much of it. And sometimes that's just the way that is. Faith is always a gift. You're not entitled to it. See, that's what people get wrong. Even the missionaries and even the church itself has gotten that wrong for so many years. They think faith is an entitlement. Faith is not an entitlement. All right? Faith is a gift. And God gives it to whom he wills. And who is going to question that? I mean, I'm not going to. It might seem difficult to understand. But I do feel that faith is available to those who seek after it. So if it's a gift that you want, then it's not difficult to get. But you have to put some effort in. Otherwise, God moves on to those who do. Okay, let's see. All right. Remember My Name on April 16th asks, what are your feelings regarding the aliens among us? Some paranormal specialists are pushing the envelope of our ability to accept and believe. Isn't it enough to face the supernatural nature of God without complicating our tiny minds? What a question. Okay, well, first of all, speculation is a good thing. So, even though aliens kind of fall outside of the normal conventional religious mindset, I think it's very healthy to reach outside the box, and so I do. That's why I do. And that's why I'm criticized a lot, and why I don't fall or meet the expectations of almost everyone. And understand I'm never going to do that. Okay. I will never do that. I live by conviction, and my convictions come from a higher center. So I'm not here to please you. I'm not here to make you look how great I am. I'm on television. I'm the greatest guy. I want everyone to love me. That's just, I don't care. I hope you find some value in what I do. If you don't like me, great. If you like me, great. I love my fans. But, I don't really, I've got more enemies than I'll ever be able to count because of the work that I do. And I've come to terms with that, and I just don't give a damn. So it is what it is. Typically, it's because, you're the one with the problem, not me, because I've very rarely, I can't even recall a time in recent memory or even distant memory when I have launched an all-out assault on someone unprovoked. It just does not really happen. But thank you, Marina. Marina is doing a lot of help for me here in the chat room. She found my feeling on aliens, which we did a whole episode on aliens, actually, on Vestiges After Dark, exotheology. Are we alone? So if you want to know more about that, I think that's the one where I actually talk about the other spooky experience I had, and that's on aliens. Yes, I do, though, feel that there are, aliens do exist. I think it's very myopic to think that we are the only ones that exist in this universe, that we're the only intelligence that's out there, and we're not all that intelligent. I'm not really terribly impressed with the Homo sapien intellect, to be honest. So, I really am very hopeful that there are greater intelligences out there in the universe. Whether they're interacting with us is another question. I do suspect there are. I think there is evidence of this. I'm not going to go as far as to say the ancient aliens thing, but I am going to mention that I do think there are different levels of consciousness, different states of being, call them dimensions if you will, although I'm very cautious with that term, and that higher beings can exist or simultaneously with us and right under their noses, and neither one of us are even aware of the other. Or if they are aware, we're just not significant enough to interact with. I think that's definitely a thing. I would think of it as like ants. I've given this discussion quite a few times in Vestiges. My little ant analogy. Those of you who've listened to me for a long time know what I'm talking about. And so by all means, look at past episodes and you'll find some of these answers there. But do I think it's enough to face the supernatural nature of God without complicating it with aliens? Probably, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't explore and speculate. I think that's always a good thing. Some of us are just curious thinkers, and it helps to broaden our perspective when we do these things. It doesn't need to complicate things, even though for some people it might, but it doesn't need to. Really all you would need, ultimately, is just a basic understanding to that there's things that are greater than you are in this cosmos, and hopefully that will produce a humbling experience versus anything else. Do aliens overcomplicate things? For some, I think it might. And if it does, if it disturbs you, don't focus on it. Understand the Bible only gives you the data that is necessary for salvation. It doesn't give you a shred more than that. It even tells you this. There's even numerous sections where it talks about that there's just so much more that was not included because it couldn't be contained, or it wasn't really necessary, because the Bible was put together as a means to offer you an instruction manual for salvation. Aliens are not part of that, so there would be no reason for Scripture to even talk about them. There might be allusions here and there, but I leave that to your, to your opinions, whether or not you think some of those things actually do exist in the Scriptures. Personally, though, yeah, I think aliens are out there. Whether they're among us, that's the bigger question. But I've had personal experiences that would lead me to think that it is very, very possible. All right, Rabbit Follow Jason from April 16th asks, how much paperwork or data gathering and an analytical methods of the discipline do you record? And if so, may I be their records beneficiary? To me, you and Sister Mary Joan have made history, would cherish those documents. No, I wouldn't give them to Vatican. All of our documentation is strictly confidential, so we would never leave them to anybody. Honestly, the record keeping has been one of the struggles with trying to keep the team on task with. Hopefully, there's a better job being done now than was in years past. But we do keep a general record on all of our clients. We do take a video record of everything. It's kind of necessary in the work, also for as protection, so that if something is ever questioned about a procedure, we can show what really went on. That's all part of this as well. And so, but it's kind of informal. We're a small group. We don't have large resources. Obviously, we're not even paid to do this work. It's all volunteer basis. So there's only so much you can expect from volunteers when you're doing this work. So the data gathering is probably not as good as it should be, but it's sufficient for us to have a basic case file that lets us know what's going on. But no, it's not going to be like a big thick book that you might see from the FBI on some criminal or something like that. No, that's not going to be the kind of time we have. We don't have the time for that. Let's do one more question here, and then we'll go to a quick break and then come back and answer more. Kevin Pennell from April 16th. Have you ever gotten scared? I know I sure as shit would be. Not much on the whole demon and Satan stuff. No, sir. Well, good for you. It's probably best that you don't get involved with things like that. I would always recommend that you avoid those things as much as possible. But do I ever get scared? No, I do not. I just don't. It would be contrary to the work. It would be a distraction, and I can't let myself fall into those kinds of emotional states when I'm doing my work, or any time really. It's just not in my nature. I can't really recall a time where I've ever really felt fear. I mean, it's just not in my nature, not to that degree. There's always anxiety from time to time. I mean, anxiety happens, but that's a very different feeling than fear. I think it's more of it's an energy feeling, it's kind of like, I don't want to sit here doing this. I want to get out there and do something, so there's like pent up energy. But no, I can't say I've ever been afraid. It's just not something that would be conducive to the work. And, we want the work to be successful. That's just, part of, par for the course. But anyway, we are going to take a break here, and, I'll be right back after a short little relaxation, get some water. If you need to go to the bathroom, now's the time. Take care.
I am able to keep pushing my limits, and all the drive that I have while I'm going the distance with you. I didn't know what I had till I knew what was missing, and everything that I dread, well, I built a resistance. And I'll keep you on the ground. You were gone, I wish you'd stay. I could look at you for a day. Time was well spent, that's when I knew that I need to spend my life here with you. Fast lane, I understand that you've been broken too many times, but I'll be waiting to mend your wounds from all you've taken. But if we listen to each other and made our mistakes, then I can show you who I am, because I'm not the same. I'm better with you. I'm better with you. With
Welcome back, everyone, to the second half of Vestiges After Dark. We're answering your questions from Twitter, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else you have to, what other subjects you've got for me. We'll see where it goes. I haven't read them all, but we'll get to more of them here in just a moment. Don't go away. Okay, let's go ahead and see what we have next as we go through this list of questions. And some of them have been really good so far. I hope you're enjoying them all. I know a lot of you have these same questions, so this is a good way to get them all out in one shot like this. But anyway, we left off here at have I ever gotten scared? All right, so let's see. Go ahead and put it over here so I can see it a little bit better. Oh, okay. Mary Nelson from April 17th asks, what protection measures are performed after the exorcism? Do you smudge, have a special specific ritual, etc.? Okay. Well, okay. Typically speaking, the preliminary is the divine office. And then we throw in communion outside of Mass, if we can. If we're pressed for time, then we'll do communion when we get back. And then, of course, there's the divine office again. So we might do Vespers before we go. We'll have communion outside of Mass if possible. If not, we'll just do Vespers, and then we'll do communion outside of Mass when we get back, and then we'll do Compline before we go to bed. And that's all that's really necessary. And a lot of greasy tacos. I'm telling you right now, greasy tacos replenish your supply of energy after an exorcism better than anything I know. So particularly when I'm on the West Coast and I can get access to Jack in the Box, that's the best that can be offered in terms of replenishing energy from an exorcism. But that's it. I mean, that's really all there is to it. We just maintain our prayer life, and it doesn't have to be anything ridiculous or extravagant. It just needs to be the basics, because all it is the cultivation of grace, and that's typically more than enough to get us back on track. And a little bit of relaxation too. You really need to rest. It is taxing, physically. It's taxing, and a bit emotionally and psychologically too, I would imagine. Although I don't really pay too much attention to my I probably ignore my emotional states more than I probably should. All right. Okay. April Blakely on April 17th. Now, she asked this question: is your work with Ghost Adventures like a team? Do you get to spend time with them on the case, or is your part mainly separate? I guess I envision the whole thing like my work, docs, nurses, therapists, etc., working as a team with my own expertise. Okay. I answered this on CyberCon. I'll just mention it again quickly. It depends on the case. Okay. So sometimes, if it warrants it, we work together, and sometimes they go in, they assess the situation, and they come back and then just say that they need me, and they send me out, and sometimes like Jay will meet me and that type of thing. But it really all depends on what's going on and what the type of case it is. So sometimes we work together on the investigation aspects of it, and sometimes it's they do that whole part, and then they just send me at the end once they've confirmed that there's some need for me there. And always if the client wants. I know a lot of times people ask, that I should have been on this particular episode or that particular episode, but understand I don't come out unless the client wants an exorcist, and not every client wants that. Some are just not comfortable with the Christian tradition, period, or even Catholicism. So, Zach's not going to just throw me into any case just because, that's what I do. I mean, he always asks if this is the kind of help that you want. And he tries to give the client the help that they feel they want. And honestly, it won't do any good for me to be there if they don't want me there. So overall, hopefully that answers the question, because, I know it is something that does come up from time to time. All right. Team Sal Bryan, April 16th, asks, what was the hardest exorcism you ever done on Ghost Adventures or other? I guess he's saying if either on Ghost Adventures or not. And did it affect you afterwards? The hardest one I ever did, and I kind of answered this also on CyberCon, there was a full possession. We weren't really sure what that it was that severe until this might not be the hardest one. It's the one in recent memory that was very difficult because it turns out that there were multiple demons, more than 10, affecting this one client. And it took a great deal of effort and time, and it was several exorcisms in. We blew out the power to the entire block. At the time, we had the Mission Church, so we had the proper facilities for it, which made things a little bit easier, I guess. But it was just hard because the client lived far away. She was, living with family, but it wasn't working out. She ended up going back to another country, and then we lost touch. It was just a complicated case. And I never really felt satisfied with it, because I never really finished it, and that happens from time to time, that you're at the mercy of the client. And when they discontinue it for whatever reason, even if they don't want to discontinue it, if the family discontinues it, you kind of have to comply with that. You can't force yourself into their lives. It's not like a legal ruling. You're there completely on a voluntary basis. And when they don't want you there anymore, there's nothing left to do. And that happens. That happens more often than you would imagine. So I talked a little bit about that on CyberCon. No reason to go into all that detail again. But that was off Ghost Adventures. That one obviously was not on Ghost Adventures. Let me see. Okay. Anna Rochelle, April 17th. Excuse me if my terms are wrong. How many of your cases are full-blown possession like in diabolical possession? How many cases are a cause of sins like in diabolical vexation? And how can one determine simply a bad dream or one caused by an evil presence? So I'm assuming, how can you tell what's a bad dream and what's an evil presence? Okay, so the first part of the question, how many cases are full-blown possession? Almost none of them. Very rare. Okay, full-blown possession is exceptionally rare. We don't see that very often. So that's just maybe once every so many years you'll come across a genuine case. How many cases are the cause of sins? Well, all of them. All of them. But not necessarily personal sin. There's something called institutional sin. And institutional sin is when we sin by virtue of our nature. All right. There's different types of sins that we do. We're imperfect by nature now. We weren't designed to be imperfect, but we are imperfect now. And so when it comes to, the sins that we commit, some of them are done quite intentionally, and some of them are just an aspect of our flawed nature where we make mistakes. It doesn't give an excuse to it, and the consequences are very much the same. All sin, regardless of how severe or how insignificant, the consequence of it is death. This is what brought death into the world. So as an extension of that entropic condition, there's also evil that needs to be contended with now. And so when we sin, and particularly if we go into patterns of sin, continuously doing the wrong thing or performing acts of evil, that creates a condition where it lowers our vibration and makes it more compatible with the demonic realm, or what we call the demonic realm. Demonic realm is really just low energy. But for our purposes, if we, come up with theological names for things, you can say the demonic realm. And so the closer you bring your vibration down to their vibration, the more compatible you are with that energy, which means they become more aware of you, and they see you as a food source. And fear, as we've said in previous questions, previous answers to previous questions, is their food of choice. I actually have a little joke. I say fear is the crack cocaine of the demonic industry. And it's not really all that much of a joke. It really is an industry. And the CEO is not Satan. He's just on the board. The CEO is all of us. We run the demonic industry. Human beings do a great job of that. We don't really need demons to do any evil. All right, let's see what's next. And how can one determine a bad dream from an evil presence? You really can't. You really can't tell the difference. I mean, because other than the fact that demons are not typically going to come to you in a dream, because you have to give consent to have that type of interaction. They don't have the ability to enter into your mind unless you've already given them permission to do so, and that usually has to come through attachment. Where you've been weakened down to the point that now they're starting to get in. But they don't typically have that. Now, that being said, created demons, because they are originating from your psyche, will appear to have full access of your mind. And because you created them out of your own psyche, they kind of intimately know your psyche very well. And so that can sometimes manifest into a dream. That's sometimes the first way that it would. A created demon would a thought form would have an easier time manifesting in a dream state versus being in the physical world, where there's more energy required for that, and it's a denser reality. It's not as ethereal as a dream. So you wouldn't be able to necessarily tell. The layman wouldn't be able to necessarily tell in the beginning. What you would do is you would always look for other signs, other indicators, not just that one. So if there is a demon that's interacting with you on some kind of intimate, personal level, like a dream, you'd want to be seeing other things going on, or is it just that? Was that the first time it happened? Is it the only thing that's happened? If it's a reoccurring dream, is it only ever happening in a dream, or are there other manifestations? If there are other manifestations outside of the dream, that's when you need to take it maybe a little bit more seriously, where your psyche's picking up on it. It's not really the demon communicating with you, though. It's more of your psyche picking up on the energy. And it's, subconsciously trying to warn you. Hopefully that answers the question. All right. Truth be told, from April 16th. Have you ever had a demon you couldn't get rid of? We lived in an infested house my whole childhood, and this one spirit would lurk in the hallway, and it smelled like rotten fish. We prayed and prayed and prayed, had mass said in our house, just wouldn't go. Okay. Have I ever had a demon I couldn't get rid of? No. But I have had demons that I have gotten rid of that my clients have brought back, because they have not allowed themselves to cultivate the grace needed to break the attachment. So, no, I've never had a situation where a demon would not break in an exorcism. Never. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an underlying issue there that it needs to be dealt with at a different time. And it's extremely difficult to get clients to comply with your instructions. Extremely, exceptionally hard. They just don't want to do what's necessary. It's just like, I liken it back to the medical field. It's like, going into your doctor. Let's say you're a chain smoker, right? Chain smoking all your life. You're smoking like a chimney. And you're getting some problems, and you go to the doctor, and the doctor does some x-rays and tells you you've got cancer. Now, it's a treatable cancer. But you're going to have to quit smoking. Otherwise, it's going to reoccur, and it will get you next time. So the doctor could spend all this time treating you. And if you're not willing to give up smoking, you've wasted his time, and his treatment's not going to work in the end. You're going to die. And demonic possession is not unlike that. It requires a change of lifestyle. It requires a reform within oneself. And if the person's not ready or willing to do that, the exorcist as a facilitator can only solve the immediate issue. This is why we have, this new show concept that some of you probably know about, called Paranormal Paramedics with Darren Evans and Patty Negri, and Sister Mary Joan. The point behind this and why we use the term paramedics, which sometimes has gotten some people upset, they don't realize that Sister Mary Joan and Patty Negri are first responders. They have that training, and Sister Mary Joan's an active duty police officer. So it does apply. We're not just making up the term for the hell of it. I used to work in lockdown facilities with extremely mentally disturbed clients that the police would bring in off the street. So we've all done our share of first responding. But we use the term paramedics more so in the context that this is more like paramedic work at the paranormal level. Because what we can do is we can come in and we can stop the problem, give you time to like it's basically you're having a heart attack. We can stop the heart attack. That doesn't mean that we've cured the underlying condition. It doesn't mean that the thing that caused the heart attack, the cardiovascular disease, that's not being fixed by our work. What we're here to do is save your life in this moment so that you can be stabilized enough that you can maybe get better later. That's really more of the work that we do when you see us on television, more of the work that we do when we go to houses out of state, because there's only so much long-term care we can do. And now that the Mission Church has closed due to lack of funding, there's really not much long-term care we can give at this point. We really can only do that first stage, get them stable, give them some real good solid instructions, refer them to a church where they can build a spiritual life and hope that they will comply. A lot of times they don't. So, that's just the way, you do what you can, but it's the way it is in this work. So yeah, I've never had one I couldn't get rid of, but I've had ones that clients keep bringing back. So if you're having a demon that you can't get rid of, well, probably that has more to do with the fact that you don't have the resources to fight such a thing. You would need somebody that's professionally skilled to go in there and actually get rid of it for you. All right, Rena from April 16th. What is the most terrifying thing you've experienced? I've already answered that one, so we'll move on. April 17th from Highland Fashionista. Oftentimes, television makes it seem like every place let me start over. Oftentimes, television makes it seem like every place with spirit energy is infested with evil spirits, demons, trapped souls, etc. How common are the negative demonic energies? Rarely, as opposed to just residual energies, etc. That's a really good question. I like this question. Let's see. Well, all of those are possibilities. Okay, evil spirits are multiple things. I would say you could legitimately call something an evil spirit or a demon if it causes malignant effects in the living. But that doesn't mean they're all fallen angels. That's why we have our 4 categories. And I already mentioned them. Fallen angels, elementals, created, and wrathful spirits. Wrathful spirits are just basically human beings that have died, that weren't ready to go. They died some traumatic death. They became that trauma, and now they're terrorizing people like a demon. Also, spiritual degradation, where a person dies and is attached and will not let go, will not move on, will not cross over, as that spirit degrades and decomposes, which they do. They're not eternal like people think they are. The spirits are the spirit aspect is just as temporary, just as impermanent as the physical. They will degrade, and as they degrade and decompose, they become more and more of a lower level energy system, which is more demonic in experience. So a lot of times it could be any one of those things. It's almost never a fallen angel, though. Trap souls is a big one, and elementals is a big one. Although I'd hesitate to call elementals evil. They're, most of them are just neutral forces that are not compatible with human beings, and so we experience them in a negative way. But yeah, television does make it seem like all these places are infested with evil. And I guess you could say to some degree theologically that is true, because when, if you look at it from the Judeo-Christian theological story of the Garden of Eden, which is of course a metaphor, it's not a real historical event, it's a metaphor for a spiritual reality that's ineffable beyond our understanding or comprehension of God. When we committed original sin and fell from grace, the entire creation fell. And what that means is not like falling out of the sky, right? It's falling in vibration, going from a very high frequency to a very low frequency. And that low frequency is where this thing that we call demons comes from. And so the more compatible your energy stream is with the demonic, the more evil you're going to be aware of. Evil's everywhere. Whether or not it affects you depends upon your vibrational rate, which is why the sacraments and baptism and the Eucharist and prayer and trying to live the best possible life that you can raises your vibration to the point that even though there are demons everywhere, you will be impervious to them if you are persevering in your faith. That's how it works. Kind of a metaphysical way of explaining it. Hopefully it makes sense to you. All right, Kristen Coppola from April 17th. What experiences have you had involving your senses? Things you saw or heard, for example. How have you been spiritually attacked for doing the work that you do? I get attacked mostly with my eyes, or dizziness, but it'll be like burning eyes, which you've seen happen often on the show, on Ghost Adventures. And I, have found that headaches are also something that manifests often. Dizziness to try to get me distracted from the prayers. These are all things that I guess fall within the realm of senses. You hear things, when you see on Ghost Adventures where, like, did you hear that? And sometimes you don't hear it on the screen, but it really is there. We did hear things. We're not just making this up to make the show more interesting. There really was an unexplained sound or voice or something that might not come through as clearly to the viewer on the show, but when you're there in person, you experience it more deliberately. And I've had all sorts of things. I've heard disembodied voices without the use of equipment before. These are things that happen. I've seen apparitions. So all of my senses, even smells, all of my senses have been affected. You feel things touch your skin sometimes. Even on that recent episode of Ghost Adventures, my leg was grabbed. I think you all saw that. Okay. Chris Fernandez on April 17th says, I have so many questions. I don't know where to begin. I guess the one that's on my mind a lot is proof of angels. We have a ton proof there are demons, but where are the angels? Or would you be the angel? I'm definitely not the angel. I'm not good enough for that. If you can open a portal to invite evil in, where's the portal for good? That's a good question. It's something that definitely comes up a lot. Where's the proof of angels? Why aren't we seeing angels infestations, right? Where are the angel infestations? And that's a very easy one to explain because I've actually already explained it. Because of vibration. The earth fell from grace with original sin, which lowered our vibrational density. And so now we're more compatible with the demonic. So now it's less compatible with angels. Now that doesn't mean angels aren't here, but there is more of a effort that must be made at a supernatural level for those interactions to occur. So we're not typically going to be privy to them because they're all happening under our noses because our density is too low. But this is why saints, who have lived, inspiring lives and have done amazing things and cultivated so high levels of grace, they have these moments of ecstasy where they see angels. And I mean, I'm not trying to say I'm a saint, but I've had some encounters with angels, but they're always initiated by them. It's not something like I'm going to go and let me go talk to the angels. Let me see if I can find one. I mean, they find me and do what needs to be done, and then that's it. And that's only happened I could count on half of one hand how many times that's happened. So, but they are there. It's just our density is too low vibration, and because of sin, to be able to encounter them at that level. But they're there. And the angels have a strict protocol not to interfere with human beings unless they have to. All right. How does one learn what you know? This is the same person, Chris Fernandez, asks more questions. How does one learn what you know? I mean, I'm sure there's a strict, serious class, but is it open to anyone willing to commit to the faith and work of God? Okay. Well, there's different ways to learn this. The most important and typically the most effective way is mentorship. So what you do is, as a priest, you come under a more experienced priest and you do the work with them, and you basically learn in the field, what needs to be done. So it's basically done through mentorship. Okay, there are classes. The Vatican even holds classes. I believe they are open to the laity. Not to actually engage the work, but to learn about it. And different programs. There's different programs that exist in the independent sacramental movement. Some of them are really good. Some of them are not so good. But most of the time, you basically learn through experience. And God fills in the gaps. The Holy Spirit fills in the gaps always. So anything I didn't know, I didn't really need to know, because when those moments came, the Holy Spirit gave me what I needed to be able to do what needed to be done. And that's where the priesthood becomes so important, because that grace is always there, always working. And I couldn't function without that, even in my regular life. The sinfulness of man is too great. So we have to completely surrender ourselves over to God always, at all times, knowing that we don't deserve any of it. Any of the things that God gives us, we don't deserve. The only thing we deserve is death. And so everything else is a pure gift. And so, you just put yourself at the foot of the cross, and even though you're a terrible sinner, you go on, and God gives you the strength to do what needs to be done. The apostles, this is how they functioned. They weren't great people either. We can remember them as saints now, but at the time they weren't that great. I mean, Christ had a lot of problems with them. All right, let's see. David Garza, April 16th. Cool. I've actually been wondering, how did you end up on Ghost Adventures in the first place? Did you see the show and contact them, or did Zach or his crew reach out to you? And if so, how did he find you? Okay, this was answered on CyberCon, but I'll answer it again briefly here. It's not a very long question. I mean, I really don't entirely know the whole story as to how they found me. I know that, I've been doing this work for a while, and Dave Schrader called me one day and said that he was wondering if I had any cases that might be viable for a Halloween special that they were doing. And I couldn't get any of my clients willing to do the show. So I really wasn't able to assist. And so several months went by, and I didn't hear anything because I wasn't able to help. And I get called by somebody in production that there's a case that Zach is working on. This happened to be exorcism in Erie, that he needed. He wanted my involvement. He wanted my help. And so later that night, he called me and told me all about the case. We talked for about 45 minutes to an hour. And the next day I was on a plane out there and shooting Exorcism in Erie. So that's how I ended up on Ghost Adventures. And I guess it was through Dave Schrader that, following people in the paranormal, people that are doing work, and going from there. All right. Ghost Cat Dave 2, April 16th. On the minor rite of exorcisms you perform on Ghost Adventures, do they take, or do you have to return to repeat the rite? This kind of goes into what we've been saying earlier. It all depends on the client's compliance with the treatment plan, because whether or not, the minor rite always takes, but that doesn't mean that the attachment, isn't invited back by living continuing the situation that caused it in the first place. This is why, I get a lot of flack for the episode where we burnt, those ashes and destroyed all those articles that the client was holding on to. But those were major attachment sources. The goal here is to get better. The goal here is not to coddle them into a permanent state of illness, and this is necessary. So, there's lots of hard things that need to be done sometimes, and sometimes the clients aren't willing to do them. Do they stick? If the client's non-compliant, then no, they don't, because they invite the problem back into their lives. If they follow the rules, then typically we can, we see a resolution. Sometimes I have to go back, even when they are compliant, to just do some follow-up stuff. But typically speaking, there's a slow, gradual pace towards improvement. And sometimes there's only so much you can get from a situation where you're there for a very short period of time, and you try to do as much as you can in that period of time. Out-of-state cases, whether they be for Ghost Adventures or not, are expensive. So you can't really spend a whole lot of time on them. You do what you can do. And you try to help. It's just like being a paramedic again. You're going in there not to necessarily cure the entire problem, but to get them stable enough so that they can get the help that they need. And sometimes you can give that, sometimes you can't, but you can always give guidance. And that's what we do. We stabilize and then give guidance. The long-term care part, we really can't do anymore. And if clients don't want to see us again, then we move on to other cases. Too many cases to deal with. All right. Okay. Remember My Name Again on April 16th. I'd like to cite the Salem witch trials. Is mass hysteria still considered a source of unexplained behavior? Is exorcism today simply feeding the media machine? How do we prevent Satan from using your work on TV to his good? Okay. Few things of consideration here. Good question, by the way. Mass hysteria. Yeah, it's always a problem. We're seeing it right now with coronavirus. There's terrible mass hysteria going on around this. There's all sorts of conspiracy theories being, produced on both sides of the political spectrum about it. That's all caused by mass hysteria. It's all caused by fear reaction. It's what gets me so upset. And if you follow me on my private Facebook, I really warn you not to, because you're just not going to be used to that version of Bishop Bryan. But I don't put up with that bullshit. And it's bullshit. I'm going to just say it right as it is. I'm never going to lie to you. Look, you might not like what I have to say, but the one thing you'll always be able to count on is that I'm always telling you the best truth that I have available to me. I will never give you any less than that. All right? I'll never play pretentious games. I'm never going to give you the biases of the other people. I don't even align to bias. All right? Conservatives and liberals are the same to me. All right. It doesn't matter. What matters is what course of action produces the best good. And that's not always easily agreed upon. And if it can't be agreed upon, then I throw it out. And I look for a higher standard of objectivity. Because typically if it can't be agreed upon, it's because there's just too much bias put into the equation. In terms of mass hysteria, that's always going on. And yes, paranormal is not immune to it. In fact, it is very much a part of it. A lot of cases turn out to be people that just have overactive imaginations. They think something's going on and there really isn't. Okay. But I wouldn't say that exorcism is feeding the media machine at all. I mean, yeah, there are people that are very much into it, but most sources of media do not want anything to do with it. Case in point, this is why it's been so difficult to get our show on the air. And I've had many different treatments, that we've tried to get the networks to pick up, and it's been a considerably hard journey. Because the fear is, do people really want to see exorcisms? Do they really want to see the demonic? Do they really want, do they want the religious connotations that come with it? These are all questions that come to people's minds when you're looking at it from a network perspective. And that, of course, leads to some of the issues. So I wouldn't say the media machine's being fed by this at all. In fact, they're kind of afraid of it. And there's been only just a few groups that have been interested. Rolling Stone magazine interviewed me once, and that was kind of I think a fun article for them, but not really feeding the media machine at all, because there's just not a lot of interest. I think a lot of people really, honestly, from the secular world, see it as just a vestige of an earlier time, and that it's all mental illness. But religion has the practices that they haven't gotten rid of yet, and they don't really see the evil or the supernatural aspects of it. So that's part of it. But the last question: how do we prevent Satan from using your work on TV to his good? Honestly, it always works the opposite for Satan, because I can tell you that even though, one might see this coming on television in the capacity that I have to do the work that I do as some kind of exploitation of the right. I know there's definitely people in the Roman Catholic Church that see me this way. The reality of it is, though, it has actually brought greater levels of awareness, and where there's awareness, there's less fear. Because there's a lot of stigma to being demonically attached or possessed, to the point that it's almost like rape culture. There was a time where people just did not talk about being raped. They were afraid of how people would view them, so they just let the crime go and did nothing about it, and then lived with the trauma indefinitely. And we now know in our wisdom that this is not an acceptable thing, and that this needs to stop. And so now people take action. They come forward. They bring it into the light. And I see this as no different than that. So this brings out awareness that otherwise people would not have, because certainly, the conventional churches are not talking about it, and they need to be, but they're not. And so I've also been told, and Marina, you just said this in the chat room, I've also been told by countless people, more than I can even possibly imagine, how many I have brought back to the church. And I think that's great. They haven't come to my church because I don't have one anymore. But I don't care. I'm not trying to steal followers from other churches. I just want people to get the spiritual guidance they need and the graces that are there. So, honestly, it's done the devil a great disservice, because people have seen the power of God in those episodes, and recognize it for what it is, and say, hey, this is something that I need in my life. And if I can have been an instrument for that, then that's been all worth it, honestly. I mean, because there's countless people that have told me this. I mean, I can't tell you how many messages and emails. I mean, I get so many messages, I can't possibly respond to them all anymore. But I do read. I used to read them all when I could. Now I can't even get through them. But I try. And I mean, I can't even tell you how many come in on a regular basis telling me this. Thank you for bringing me back to the church. Thank you for bringing me back to a relationship with God. Watching you on Ghost Adventures changed me. God, that was worth it. Quite the opposite from, Satan using it for his good. It's really God, the joke's on Satan. All right, Rose Lewis from 12 hours ago. Oh my, this is a recent one. How did you decide to become an exorcist, and is exorcism accepted in the Catholic Church? Do you have to be spiritually strong to be an exorcist? Well, I already mentioned how I became an exorcist, so I'm not going to answer that one again. I think they're asking, is exorcism accepted in the Catholic Church? I think they're asking if mine are. I mean, in the Roman Catholic Church, your guess is as good as mine. I can tell you this. There are Roman Catholic clergy that send me cases. I'm not going to mention who they are because I don't want to get them in trouble. But they know that their own diocese is not going to help. So they call me. Okay, so that's clearly there's a lot of people in the Roman Catholic Church, clergy included, that respect what I do and recognize that there is definite grace there. And so it would be foolish for them to not accept the exorcisms that we do because I have apostolic succession just like they do. I have all of the authority of the church, just as any of their bishops do. So, and not meant to mention the great success of my work, which is Christ's work through me. And that's really the formula that really makes it work. We don't charge for these services. We do ask for donations to pay for the core expenses, but we never, we don't take profit in it. We don't get paid through it. It's only, whatever the expenses are to travel somewhere, or so the church doesn't take too much of a hit. And a lot of times they can't pay. The church takes the full hit. That's where your donations become so invaluable to all these clients. But I don't know if they, I'm sure there's some that don't accept it, but that's really their problem. Do you have to be spiritually strong to be an exorcist? Absolutely. If you're not going to survive in this work. Not even for one day. Paranormal Explorer from April 16th. Was there ever an entity at a Ghost Adventures location that you felt was too strong for you to overcome? So now, this is a little bit different than the other question because this is talking about just Ghost Adventures locations. No, I have never encountered anything on Ghost Adventures that I was not able to resolve, or at least be able to resolve if the client was fully compliant. We haven't always had compliant cases on Ghost Adventures. April 16th. From Chrissy Love. How does it feel leaving a case? Is there a ritual to follow as you leave? It's always very refreshing. There's like a peacefulness or a coolness that comes over. It's definitely a change in environment. You can feel that. So, there's that. That's how I feel when I leave. Just a sense of peace and relaxation and calm. And definitely a coolness. There's like a very cool lighter air after I leave. And is there a ritual to follow as you leave? I mean, I typically, just do a final blessing. And like I said, for my own self, it's either communion outside of Mass, if we haven't had it that day, or the Divine Office. Always the Divine Office. Let's see. Ronald James from April 16th. Thank you, Bishop. Can you talk about any of your experiences with haunted or demonic dolls? Yeah, we actually did a live stream of one once, and we get them from time to time. At least we used to at the Mission Church. We don't have really a means to do that type of the ministry right now. I think we still have one in containment, actually. And yeah, I do have experiences. Understand that a lot of times it is the manifestation of a created, so. This is going to be hard for a lot of people to accept and believe, and I understand that. But metaphysically, if you understand the metaphysics of it, it's not going to be a huge shocker to you. But I know it's going to be surprising to some. And I've mentioned this on Twitter, so if you follow me closely on Twitter, you've already heard me say this, or what I'm about to say. Essentially, dolls and toys, stuffed animals, plushies, that type of thing. When they are very much loved by a child, to a point that it becomes almost like a favorite toy. Think Toy Story. There's a little bit of truth to that. A tulpa gets literally birthed within that object. And it feeds off of the love, as any living thing would. Remember, thought forms are very real. They're just as real as you and I. In fact, in a lot of ways, we could be reduced down to a thought form as well, just a very physically dense one. But for children, the love and of course the faith that a child puts into a toy when they really love it is real, and that produces reality within the toy. But when the child grows up, it starts to ignore the toy. It's no longer getting that love. Or worse, it gets old, thrown out. It becomes a source of hostility. Just like anything that would not be properly cared for. And so a lot of these haunted dolls are not demons in the traditional sense. They're not like fallen angels that go inside the doll and make the doll move around, It's a little bit different than the story that's told with Conjuring, with their version of the Annabelle story, which is a little bit different than the real story. But most of the time, these haunted toys or haunted dolls, haunted plushies, are the result of love that's been lost. So I always tell people, always love your toys. Take care of them and take them into adulthood. Even if you don't have to play with them, always give them an honored place because there's energy there. You created life there. And it might not seem like life to the average secular person, but to this universe, it's just as sacred. And it will respond in kind. And so a lot of these toys are just literally that. Just like, like the shows. Like Toy Story kind of talks about this. Polar Express has a little scene on the train about this. There's the Island of Misfit Toys and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. There's a lot of archetypal stories that sort of teach us about this. That's reality. It really is true. So most of the haunted dolls are that. And demonic, almost never. It's demonic because the spirit, the energy that's gone into it has been deprived of love for so long that it starts to turn and becomes lower vibratory and more evil in experience. All right, Specky Sam, 11 hours ago. Have you ever had an exorcism case where the afflicted person aggressively confronts you with personal details they couldn't possibly know? And what do you and Sister Mary Joan do to unwind and try to come back to normality after extreme cases? Okay. I have never experienced a client who could aggressively tell me things about me that they could not know. I've never had that happen. It does happen. It just hasn't happened to me. And part of it is that I have an extensive amount of meditation training. So I am very focused. And it's very difficult for me to become distracted when I'm working. So, as long as I can maintain the wits about me through the work, which again comes from not engaging in fear or emotionalism, they're not able to tap into my life and get information. I'm not going to say it will never happen, but it's just never happened. But it does happen. I've seen it happen to other exorcists. It's one of the things we actually look for. We call it retrocognition, knowing things about a person's past. All right. What do we do to unwind? We drink scotch, of course. What else is there to do when you need to unwind is to drink a really good single malt with a good number of years on it. That is always my preferred remedy. In moderation, it's a very useful thing. All right. Barrington T. Compelling an entity. Have you had to deal with a case where the entity does not comply? And if so, is this down to the belief of the entity? Hope this makes sense. Compelling an entity. Have you ever had to deal with a case where the entity does not comply? And if so, does this come down to the belief of the entity? Now, it doesn't really have anything to do with any of the belief of the entity. It has more to do with the vibratory rate of the entity, which is really, for all intents and purposes, I guess you could say their version of a belief system, although it really isn't a belief system. It's not like a cognitive choice, like I'm going to be this or that. Like a jinn in Islam versus a fallen angel in Christianity. Have you had to deal with a case where the entity does not comply? Well, initially they never comply. That's what exorcism's all about, wearing them down energetically to the point that they don't have a choice and they're compelled by the power of the cross. So that's what we tend to do. And that's that's why it takes so long, because it's just a wearing down of the demon until they can no longer have the strength to resist. And so that's all it is, So they always not comply at first, but they eventually always succumb to it. They fight it for a while, but, eventually they give up. All right. Let's do another one here, and then we'll take another break and answer some more questions. There's only a few left, but we'll take another break here. I need another drink. My voice is starting to give out. So let's do one more. Teresa Whaley from 11 hours ago. What are your thoughts on humans having extraterrestrial DNA? I just watched a documentary on Star Children. It is an interesting idea. I don't really have an opinion other than the fact that I think it is pretty much established that all DNA is probably from somewhere else. You might probably get here on a comet or something like that. So technically speaking, we are extraterrestrials. And I think that's pretty well established science too. It's not even getting into the more new agey stuff. I think there's something that happened in our evolution, clearly. I mean, when you look at the fact that 98% of our DNA is almost identical to a chimpanzee, but it's that 2% that makes us human. And that's a big 2% when you look at it. I mean, look how different we are from chimpanzees. So that had to come from something that was not necessarily natural, because the jump, and this is the big problem for, evolution. And I'm a strong advocate of evolution, let me tell you. I mean, I believe very strongly in evolution. I am not a creationist in that traditional sense. My creationism is that God creates through processes, and the process science calls God's creation evolution. I don't see a conflict. But overall, I think there is a problem when you look at the evolutionary path of how we became human beings to the point of Homo sapien, is that it happened too quickly. Something seemed to interfere with the natural development of the chimpanzee DNA, and so it converted us to this. But we are primates still. I mean, it's just, why are we so different than the other primates in the terms of, intellect in particular? That could be extraterrestrial intervention. Who knows? I don't know. I mean, it's hard to get information from that. It's hard to observe information metaphysically about that. So it's a good speculation. I think it's very plausible, but there's no way to really know, except to just continue to explore and see what actually comes of your explorations. And speaking of which, we're going to take a little break here again. I'll be right back with more answers to your questions. Don't go away.
When I'm with you, I am able to keep pushing my limits, and all the drive that I have, well, I'm going the distance with you. I didn't know what I had till I knew what was missing, and everything that I dread, well, I built a resistance with you. Catch me when I fall, and I'll keep you on the ground. You were gone, I wish you'd stay. I could look at you for days. Time was well spent, that's when I knew that I need to spend my life here with you. Take your time, not in the fast lane. I understand that you've been broken too many times, but I'll be waiting to mend your wounds from all you've taken. But if we listen to each other and admit our mistakes, then I can show you who I am, because I'm not the same. I'm better with you. I'm better with you. I'm better with you. Catch me when I fall, and I'll
Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down. Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna let it away. Tonight, we're gonna let it away. Tonight, we're gonna let it away. Just like the sunrise, we're gonna let it away. Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna let it away. Tonight, we're gonna let it away. Tonight, we're gonna let it away. Just like the sunrise, we're gonna let it away.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to I guess the third half of the show. This one won't be quite as long because we are getting to the end of the questions here, but I wanted to get through all of them if possible, and there's no reason to stop now. So let's go ahead and finish these up for this evening, and hopefully you'll have a more enlightened understanding as to what's going on in this paranormal world that I end up working within. Okay. Vivian from April 17th asked, I would really like to know your advice for people dealing with negative spirits and have possibly been connected with one for a long time. Raise your vibration. Raise your vibration to the point that you become so inhospitable to this thing that it breaks off. Now, typically that's done through the rites of the church. Unfortunately, not everybody is of that persuasion. So you have to find the elements within your worldview that do the same thing. Now, I will say not all belief systems are equal. They're not. Some are far more sophisticated and advanced than others. Christianity just happens to be the best one for this type of thing. But raise your vibration. Because if you have an attachment, it's because you've let it go so low that now you're operating at that demonic level. And that's how it happened. It's so simple that people can't figure out how to fix it. But that's how you deal with it. And all worldviews have a means to deal with this. Not all of them are as good as the Christian one in terms of eliminating or raising vibration or eliminating demonic entities. But all worldviews have some version of it. And some are quite effective. Buddhism's excellent for it. Certain shamanic traditions are excellent for it. Not all of them, but most of them are. even voodoo works very well. Joanne Brown from April 16th. Have you ever been called back to any of the families you have helped on ghost adventures because they are still having problems with demons? We answered that. No, well, I mean, I guess we haven't really answered it that way. No, I've never been called back. We almost went back for a case, and then it was discontinued. So most of the time, like I said, if I don't hear from the client, we take that as a good sign, but we always leave our card. We always give them all the means of communication. Sometimes Sister Mary Joan will even call them, make sure they're okay. And, we let them guide us as to what they need next. Tanya Andre of April 21st. I legitimately thought that if you're a child of God, you can't get haunted. What's your take on it? No. Anybody that we exist in a fallen state. So being a child of God doesn't make you any less a sinner. It just gives you a remedy for dealing with your sin. But sin still exists. So whether or not you've given yourself over to Christ doesn't change the fact that sin is still going to bring evil into your life. You have to deal with it now. Now, being a child of God gives you a lot of grace to work with to fix this. But no, it's not going to, I mean, the hauntings are not going to not happen just because you have, it's not like protection. You're not impervious to the demonic. You have to work it out. This is why we deal with it. We're not given an instant solution. God wants us to work it out for ourselves. This is why we have this life. That's actually the meaning of life at this point. Why would we still stay within imperfection? To learn about how to become perfect. That's why. Okay, let's see what else we got. We got a few questions that came in on different feeds, so I'm going to go through them real quick because we still have a little bit of time. All right, Michelle from 47 minutes ago asked, do you think people who commit heinous acts, infamous mass murders, for example, are influenced by darker entities beyond scientific mental illness explanation? Oh, absolutely. In fact, I would say that almost all mass shootings, anytime there's some kind of extreme serial killing, anything like that is outside of normal, we can call them normal, but normal crimes of passion that will from time to time occur. I mean, murders happen. They shouldn't, but they're not always motivated by the demonic outside of just, like I said, natural human sinfulness, which is usually more than enough to commit heinous acts. But when you start getting into like these extreme forms, I do think there's definitely some kind of possession going on, like the Mandalay Bay shootings, for example, or the Sandy Hook. These are not. This is even beyond human evil. I mean, this is some kind of level where the person's been compromised, and I'm convinced of it. I mean, no question about it. I've seen it in my own clients. Not that they've committed these things, but I've seen the mark of evil in my own clients, and I've recognized it in some of these extreme cases of violent crime. Adam Haiti from 2 hours ago. What was the hardest paranormal confrontation you've encountered? I think we've kind of answered that one. All right, let's see. Anna Rochelle, 9 hours ago. I find the deeper I get in Bible stories, the more I have these types of dreams. Oh, wait, this is the second part. There's the first part. Let me read that first. I would like you, maybe on another episode of Vestiges After Dark, to talk about sleep paralysis and incubus succubus. I have this in other disturbing dreams, even one about a house, what I presume was Hades, where people were having sex in the fontanelle, the gap in the cranial bone. I find this thing's messing up with me. I find the deeper I get into Bible stories, the more I have these types of dreams. I do find that when I pray in the dream, I got the words, but simply saying, in my dream, Jesus Christ, I wake up. Do you think this is like Paul's thorn in the flesh type of thing? I mean, again, like we talked about earlier, trying to recognize the difference between what could be the demonic influencing a dream or, a bad dream or a nightmare has a lot to do with the things that your psyche is dealing with. Okay, so it's not like the demons coming into the dream and trying to give you a message. That's not typically how it works. It's more about how your psyche's interpreting the data around it. Okay, so if you're having these kinds of encounters, then it typically means that there's some kind of spiritual thing that needs to be dealt with on a personal level. Most likely, some kind of deficit within yourself that you need to identify and fill. Now, as a Christian, Christ is the reason, is the way and the means through which that's achieved. The reason he comes to us is for this reason. Okay, so, that should be sufficient. But it's not always sufficient for everybody because, there's different religions and different worldviews, and Christianity has gotten a bad name because there's been a lot of lousy Christians out there that have done some horrible things and have driven people away. So, again, you got to figure out what might be going on spiritually that you need to resolve. That's usually what these dreams mean. Remember, dreams are almost always manifestations of ourselves. The characters that you encounter in your dream are usually aspects of your own psyche. All right. Roger from 10 hours ago. I often dream of being tempted by or recruited by the devil. I dream of battling demons as well. Does that have any specific spiritual meaning? Or might I need some other professional advice? Just curious. Again, same answer. Dreams are usually, the characters that are in your dreams are usually aspects of your own nature. If you feel like the devil's recruiting you in a dream, it most likely is because there's some dark side of your nature that's trying to come out. It is almost never the devil. All right, let's see. I think there might be just one more question here, and then we're almost done. Let me make sure that I've got everything here. Yeah, Joy Keeling in the chat says it best. It's the brain processing the info it received during the day. So, typically that's all the dream is. Usually dreams of evil or danger are just like uncertainties and fears that are having to be dealt with. I lost that question and I want to find it. I don't want to... I don't want to ignore it because it was just in front of me and I lost it. Give me just a moment here to see if I can find it. There's just so many tweets on here. It's hard to get through them all. I mean, if I miss a tweet, it's most likely because there's just too many coming in. I don't know if I'm going to find it. Let me see if I can kind of remember. I saw part of it. The person was asking whether it's safer to learn tarot, and I think they were saying scrying. And I'm not sure. That's why I was trying to bring it back up so I can get the whole question before I lost it. Look, I can probably answer this without looking for it. Whoever asked it, I'm not even sure. No occult activity is safe. If safety is your concern, then just stay away from the occult. Okay, because there is no such thing as safe practice in the occult. All of it's dangerous. The only way to have a semblance of safety is through skill. And there's not a whole lot of people that can give you the skills that are needed to be safe in occult practice, which is why most religions condemn these things. So nothing's safe. All right? Not when you're dealing with the occult. All right. But that doesn't mean it's evil. It's not like it's dangerous because it's evil. It's dangerous because you're dealing with very high-powered forces that typically you are not trained or prepared to understand or deal with, which means that you probably should stay away from it. You know, and certainly the question itself implies that you're not ready, because you wouldn't be asking that question if you really felt that you were ready for it. So I would leave it at that. Well, I want to thank you all. I know that there's probably a lot of questions inside the Facebook feed, and I, as I said at the start of this program, I could not see that. I cannot see that when I do it this way. And this show is all about answering the questions from that post on Twitter. So there's no way for me to be able to answer all of them. But if there are questions that you have, wait until I ask again on Twitter, and we'll create a new feed, and you can go right into Twitter and you can ask your questions there, and we'll do this same type of thing again, where I'll do another episode of answering your questions. We'll do a part 2, and maybe a 3 or a 4, however many we want. This is the better way to do it, because there's no trolls this way. And on Facebook Live, I've got moderators that can get rid of them. And on Spreaker, I can get rid of them. But we don't typically have those problems, at least not on Spreaker. And so, you know, it's just a better way to do it. I'm so tired of all the controversies on social media. You know, look, people have different opinions. Okay? People have different life experiences. People come from different places of wisdom. All right? And that means that your only obligation is not to change their mind, but to respect that this is the way things are. We're different people. Let's not attack people for holding a different opinion from you. It's ridiculous. I will not tolerate that anymore. I'm going to come down very hard on it. And, you know, I'm seeing it happen even on my own Facebook. You know, a lot of people are going to get unfriended if it keeps up. I'm putting a stop to it. Okay, so the best way to handle it is this way. You have questions. I know you have questions. I want to answer them. I want to interact with you. I don't want to ostracize myself from the fans of Ghost Adventures and the people that have come to enjoy what my Twitter's come to be. But this is the way it has to be now. And it was eventually going to happen. As the Twitter following grows, you know, it's just going to happen that way. Anyway, I just want to thank you all for spending this evening with me. I hope it makes quarantine a little bit more tolerable for you. If not, well, maybe you learned a little bit something that you didn't know. But you know, it's an adventure out there, and it's an interesting time to be alive. And all I can say is live skillfully and live in love. Do not succumb to personal bias. Do not succumb to personal paradigms. Understand that no one is 100% right and no one is 100% wrong. Everything has merit. Respect it. Respect each other. God bless and good night.